Shavua Tov to everyone. It is great to see you all in Israel and abroad. We hope you are all healthy and fine. Judith Katzover and myself, we want to welcome you to yet one more lecture as part of the וגאו lecture series. We want to thank Renee Margolis, Shira Schreier, and Yigal Komisarov for organizing everything that is involved. There is lots going on in Israel and the world, and there is lots we can and lots we must do. We hope you all get our weekly sovereignty newsletter to get all the updates. Tonight, it is our pleasure and honor to hear General Amir Avivi. Amir Avivi is an IDF officer in the reserves with the rank of Brigadier General. He served as Deputy Controller of the Defense System, Commander of the School of Military Engineering, Commander of the Sagi Brigade, and Director of Chief of Staff Office for Moshe Ya'alon. In 2020, he founded the Habitchonisti movement and was appointed as CEO of the movement. Members of the movement are retired senior members of the defense establishment, the IDF, Shabak, the Mossad, Israel Police. The goal of the movement is the application of sovereignty, strengthening the state of Israel's rule and the state of Israel's right to defend itself within secure borders. For us, Amir Avivi is a friend, a dear friend, and a partner in promoting sovereignty. Tonight's lecture is the national security interest of Israel. Yigal Komisarov will close all of your microphones for 45 minutes. Amir, you have 45 minutes, and then we will open the microphones and we will hear your questions. Amir, bevakasha, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll start by telling you a bit about myself. I was born in Jerusalem, 15 generations in Jerusalem, a family that was expelled from Spain, like many others, moved a short time to Saloniki, and from Saloniki came to Jerusalem. I spent most of my youth outside of Israel. My father was a high diplomat, a very esteemed diplomat in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He was Israel's ambassador in Turkey, in Chile, and in Colombia. And I spent most of my youth outside of Israel. I lived in Italy 5 years. I lived in South America 5.5 years, in Chile and Argentina. I even spent 3 years in Africa, in Ivory Coast. And before returning back at the age of 18 to Israel, I graduated from a British high school where I did my O-levels, A-levels. Got to be a house captain in this high school. I returned as a Chayal Boded, a lone soldier, to the army. My parents were still in Italy when I joined the army. I joined the combat engineers, and from there onwards, I spent 30 years in the military, mostly commanding units in the field. But as Nadia said, I had at least 2 chances to see things from really the strategic place. I stayed the camp of the Chief of General Staff, Bogi Ya'alon. I saw very closely how things work on the level of the Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, and so on, how they take decisions, how they conduct the assessment of what to do, special operations, and so on. And later on, after I was commander of the School of Engineers, I was appointed deputy of the guy in charge of all the auditing in the Israeli defense establishment. So I was basically leading all the auditing of the whole IDF, the Ministry of Defense, and the military industries. I audited readiness for the really big things like readiness for attacking Iran and readiness for operating in Lebanon and things like that. But I also audited big projects. Much is talked in Israel about the submarines and so on. I audited this a lot, and I wrote some articles about that. And of course, budgeting and different things. One of the things I was really concerned about during the years I was in the army is the question really, what is our national security goals on the long term? I've seen Oslo. I must say that I come from a very left-wing family, always voted for the Labor. And when I was a young company commander and Rabin was in the elections in 1994, as a company commander, I was very naive and I voted for Rabin, and I truly believe that there will be a serious peace process and something new. And then I saw the reality, the way we experienced it in the army. And this raised many questions in my perspective. What is the right way to go, and what are really our security needs? I especially saw it very, very clearly during 2004, or what's called the Second Intifada, and the operations we conducted afterwards. Of course, I saw all the intel when I was the assistant of the chief of staff, and the real intentions of the Palestinians. And one of the things that amazed me, that no matter how reality was really, really harsh, and we had to deal really with very difficult times, on the high level of generals, many of them, after they left the army, still pursued the same ideas, basically pushing forward retreats and giving the land to the Palestinians and trusting them to take care of our security and so on. To me, it didn't make any sense at all. And I was really surprised. There was no voice, no organization saying otherwise. And I assumed that most of the officers, like most of the Israeli society, think otherwise, but nobody is really pushing forward. And now Nadia mentioned that I'm the founder of Bitchonistim, but to tell the truth story, it's pretty much Nadia and Yudi that are the founders of this this organization. I met Nadia and Yudit a couple of years ago. They asked me to write some position papers about what it means, what happens if we apply sovereignty, what happens if we don't, and so on. And then we got talking, and they were lamenting and saying, listen, we were having all these gatherings and conferences, and there is not a single general that is willing to step up and stand and talk about sovereignty and the importance of sovereignty to Israel's national security. So I said to Nadia and Yudit, listen, for me, it's an honor talking about that. And anytime you have a conference, I'm more than willing to come and talk. And indeed, that's what happened. Each time I was invited to a different conference and talked about these issues. And then when the question was raised, who can build such an organization and make a change in the Israeli society, Nadia and Yudit talked to one of the big donors, and this is how we started moving with the Bitchonistim. They talked to me, they said, listen, there is a chance to build something new. And then this is how things happened. So basically, at the beginning of this year, I founded a Bitchonistim. To those who don't speak Hebrew, a Bitchonistim means really literally the security experts. Usually when you say about somebody who is a Bitchonist, you mean that he's high ranked and is an expert in military and security issues, although it's a kind of a slang word. So we chose this name because this organization solely deals with national security. We are not assigned to any peace agreement. We are not pushing forward any peace agreements. We don't deal with democracy. We deal with the only thing we really know about and understand. It's military issues, security, national security. This is what we deal with. And I think it's important because it's very important if you want to really, really understand what will enable us to live 1,000 years more in Israel. And I'm not looking at less than that, 1,000 years. You need to look only on national security issues, define the red lines, and then start talking about solutions. Israel today has no red lines. No red lines at all. The society, most of it, doesn't understand the issues, the importance of different national security elements. People are being really people talk to them all the time with big words. They don't really understand the issues. And today what we are doing is educating, especially the young generation, and explaining what are the national security needs, looking at the long term. And this is what I want to talk here. Now, I assume that everybody here is very ideological, and I don't have to explain to you why the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. This goes without saying. But in the young generation, it Israeli doesn't go without saying. Today, many youngsters have adopted the Palestinian narrative. The Palestinian narrative that says that we are occupiers. We came to a place that is not ours, that was a Palestinian state, and we were conquering somebody else's land. And this is why we have to just give them the land. I mean, most of it. And one of the things we deal with is explaining to the people what is the Jewish Zionistic narrative. And it really doesn't have to do with any specific solution. First of all, we have all to agree to what is stated in our Declaration of Independence. בארץ ישראל קם העם היהודי, בה עוצבה דמותו הרוחנית, הדתית והמדינית. We were created here in this land of Israel. This is where we wrote the Bible. This is our heritage. This is our history. This is our land. And then if we want to find a solution, one kind or another, that's a different issue. I always give the example of the times of the Romans, where you had different approaches how to deal with the Romans. You had Rabbi Akiva who said we have to fight and kick them out, and together with Bar Kokhba he went and did a rebellion. And you had other very prominent rabbis who said, no, listen, these guys are very strong. We have to get along with them as long as they are here, preserve our religion, preserve our heritage, and we'll see what goes on later. I'm not sure what was the right answer. I mean, Bar Kokhba's created 2,000 years of exile. I'm not sure, but I'm sure of one thing. The two sides didn't have a discussion who this land belongs to. This goes without saying. It's the Jewish land. It was a matter of how to deal with the situation. So pretty much today also, we first of all have to agree that this is our land, and then see what we'll do about it. And this is an issue concerning of national security. There is no national security without nationalism, without patriotism, without the reason why a soldier should fight for his life. And in this sense, a Bitronistic movement that has today more than 1,700 officers, commanders, and the warriors, and this is only in 10 months. In 10 months, 1,700 officers and commanders joined Bitronistim. We are having huge traction. People are looking for values. People are looking to do something important. And the first thing that unites us all is the understanding that the most important thing in national security is the sense of rightness, this understanding what you're fighting for. And we are fighting for the land of Israel, for the people of Israel, for the heritage. And therefore, we look at the land of Israel, all of it as one area, regardless of a solution, a different solution. Now, I want to share a map and go a bit into details and talk about more about national security issues. I will start with a short overview of what's going on today in the Middle East, and I'll explain why it's happening, and then we'll zoom into the land of Israel. First of all, the Middle East today is completely different from what it was a few years ago. Today, we can talk about four very clear coalitions that have formed. The last coalition was formed only in the last few months, so this is basically very new. One coalition is the Iranian Shia coalition. The Iranians are spreading their ideology and capabilities throughout the Middle East. They want to control the Middle East. And the Iranians have proxies inside Iraq. In Iraq, you have a big Shiite group and that cooperates with Iran. The same goes for Syria. The Syrian government is inclined to the Shia. Therefore, Assad is with Iran, and in Lebanon you have the Shiite minority that and the Hezbollah. So you have one arm of Iran going all the way to Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and of course getting very close to Israel on the northern border and on the Syrian border, which we are fighting at the moment. The Iranians also have they want to control the Persian Gulf, which the Arabs call the Arab Gulf, and all these areas around it, and therefore they are operating in the area of Yemen, also affecting this area and putting a lot of pressure on the Gulf states and on Saudi Arabia, trying to affect this area. This is perceived by the Sunni states, the moderate governments, as an existential threat. Iran is a threat talking about terrorism and all these militias. It's also a threat talking about their aspiration for nuclear capabilities, and they're not so far from achieving that. So this is perceived as a very, very big threat by the Sunni Middle East. The other coalition, I would call it the radical Sunni coalition, but there are two radical Sunni coalitions. One is more with a sense of realism, and the other one is completely, I would say, radical. So Turkey is leading the elements that are radical Sunni, talking about Turkey, Qatar, Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, in Jordan, and in Saudi Arabia. And these elements are destabilizing the Sunni countries from inside. It's the Sunni countries that created them. And now these elements are attacking their own countries. We have seen it very clearly in Egypt when Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood managed to gain control of Egypt for a certain time. These attempts are also in Saudi Arabia, trying to overcome the government, and in other places. And this is also an existential threat for these countries. And this is what we call the Arab Spring, that is threatening the governments and the states themselves. And we have the really radical Sunni elements like ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, that conduct global terrorism all around and not only local terrorism against the countries. Now, historically speaking, since 1945, Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed an agreement with Saudi Arabia, and this agreement made a pact that says that the Middle East will supply oil for the United States, and the United States will supply weapons and defense for these countries. In Obama's administration, this changed completely. And it changed completely because Obama wasn't dependent anymore on oil from the Middle East. The United States has become the largest exporter of oil in the world. because of the fracking technology. And when Obama looked at the Middle East, he looked at Saudi Arabia and this country saying, okay, these are a bunch of Bedouins and don't seem too serious to him, but Iran seemed to him a very serious country, and he wanted to do business with Iran. These countries felt that they were stabbed in the back, they felt a betrayal, and they understood that the United States is not necessarily going to support them anymore. The United States doesn't need the Middle East anymore. Both parties, by the way, Republicans and Democrats, basically want to be less involved in the Middle East. And this is a huge problem for these countries. Now, when they saw this happening and they saw the threat of Iran, they saw something else. They saw Israel standing firmly against Iran, even against the President of the United States. I remind you of Netanyahu's famous speech in the Congress, the two houses, where we talked about the Iranian threat. And he said something very important. He said, I am not representing only myself, I am representing also the Muslim states who are threatened by Iran. And this was the moment that a new coalition started to emerge. The Israeli Sunni coalition, moderate Sunni coalition. And they need us desperately. For them, this is an existential issue. And therefore, they will continue to sign peace agreements with Israel and strengthen this coalition. And they want to achieve a coalition that will be something that when the United States or Europe look at the Middle East, they will say, oh, okay, this is the strong coalition, we'll go with them. Because they are afraid that Biden's administration and of course the Europeans once again will side with the Iranians. And if they do so, this will threaten them seriously and existentially. Therefore, they need to build a strong coalition with Israel to be able to fight the chances of backing Iran or the radical Sunni elements. So this is a huge paradigmatic paradigm change. And from here we go and talk a bit about Israel. First of all, for us it's a very good thing, because for the first time the Palestinians, from being an asset to these countries to delegitimize Israel, have become a liability. These countries don't care anymore about the Palestinian issue. They want to take it off the table. They want to get close to Israel. They are willing to say that Jerusalem belongs to the Jews. They are willing to admit that Judean and Samaria belong to the Jews. They will say that, yes, we need a solution for the Palestinians, but they are not committed anymore to this issue. Now, when we look at the land of Israel, from the sea to the Jordan Valley, we're talking about 45 miles. It's a 45 miles country. It's less than a city. You can drive it in less than 1 hour. From the sea to the Jordan Valley. Now, from this 45 miles, 9 miles are the shores of Tel Aviv, from Tel Aviv to what's known as the Green Line or the 49th Armistice line. It's only 9 miles, and it's the shallow area, it's the coastal area. Then we have the mountains of Judea and Samaria, and then we have additional 9 miles of the Jordan Valley. That's the land of Israel. Now, from a military perspective, I'm not talking ideology now. From a military perspective, the one who controls the mountains controls Israel. There is no way to control Israel without the mountains of Judea and Samaria. Now, our ancestors understood that perfectly well, and this is why all of our civilization was built in the mountains of Judea and Samaria. How many times in the Bible do you hear about the sea? Everything revolves around these mountains. Now we, the Jewish people, we defeated empires on these mountains. We defeated the Greeks, we defeated the Romans, and I must say that with all the technology and with all the things we have today, this basic notion hasn't changed at all. At all. It's the same thing. You have to control the mountains. Now, one of the important things that we talk about when we talk about controlling the mountains is the fact that there is no control of the mountains without massive presence of Jewish towns. What enables the IDF to control the area, it's not the IDF, it's the towns. When you drive from Tel Aviv to Ariel, to Ma'ale Ephraim, and you drive, and all along Route 5, you see Jewish towns on both sides, south and north. This is what enables people to drive, and mostly you don't see the military at all. You drive, you can drive the whole way and not see even one military post on the way. But you have mass of cars moving around the road, and this creates the security and also the intelligence, because if a citizen sees something, he immediately phones. He says, listen, there is something going on here. And the army has no way to replace 500,000 citizens who drive in these roads every day. So it's not by chance that when you look at the way the towns were built in Judean and Samaria, we see three ways of looking at it. One way is building the towns that create the way to secure the Jordan Valley. Why the Jordan Valley is so important? Because this is what enables us to defend from any kind of threat from the whole Middle East. I mean, who knows if there will be a Jordan in a few years? And if there is a Jordan, if we don't control this area, we'll have millions of jihadists going into the center of Israel with weapons and so on. We sit on the Egyptian border. We left the border with Gaza. It's only a 7 miles border. That's it. And in this 7 miles, endless amount of munition are going on in all the time into the Gaza Strip. And also know-how, terrorists and so on. This is a much, much bigger border. And there is no way to seriously control it without the full presence of the IDF. And I want to be clear, there is no presence of IDF without sovereignty and towns. Anybody who claims that you can take out the towns and leave the army is simply talking nonsense, because even those talking about separation, about leaving the area, they acknowledge themselves that you can leave the army here for a year, 2, 3, 5, but then that's it. I mean, if it's not our land, we cannot be here, like South Lebanon or something like that. And so first of all, we have towns along the Jordan Valley. Then we have towns along the main roads. This is crucial. And then we have a lot of towns that separate between the Palestinian areas and the low areas of the coast area. In all the description I gave now, one word I didn't mention, Gushim. Usually when politicians talk about the towns in Judean and Samaria, of course they refer to them as settlements. They say we'll keep the Gushim, the blocks. The blocks are the least important issue here. The real issue is the roads, and most of the towns are built along the roads. The real issue is all the towns in the shallow area and in the mountains defending the Jordan Valley, and the other issue is all these towns here defending Tel Aviv. And yes, some of these areas are more densely built, so you have like a block of towns, but this is not the issue at all. And when somebody says, this is a lone settlement, he simply doesn't understand the issue. I mean, people talk about a place like, let's say here, the area of Elon Moreh or Elon Moreh or Itamar. These are areas controlling the Jordan Valley. For somebody who doesn't understand, this is a settlement somewhere in the middle of nowhere. But they don't understand the issue. Now, what I'm saying here is not different at all from what's going on in the Galil or what's going on in the Negev. It's exactly the same thing that is done there. When you have an Arab town in the Galil, you will see around it on the mountains Jewish towns. They are built the same way with the same rationale. Understanding that today maybe we have an intifada in Judean and Samaria, tomorrow maybe we'll have an intifada in the Galil. Who knows? Might happen. So Judean and Samaria is built exactly the same. Now, one of the misconceptions about the issue of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is that people claim falsely that if we apply sovereignty in areas that are not controlled by the Palestinians, namely Area C, we know that today, after Oslo, we have the brown areas are areas A, the yellow ones are B, and all the other areas is C. So they claim that if we apply sovereignty in Area C, it means we annex 2 million Palestinians and we have to give them Israeli citizenship. And this is simply not true. I mean, it's easy to understand it looking at Trump's plan. Trump's plan is far from being a perfect plan, but it adheres to one very important thing. It says, first of all, the Americans understand that the Jordan Valley, in its broader sense, is crucial for Israel's security. They understand that Israel must retain security all over Judean and Samaria. They understand that the towns are crucial to do that. And they also understand the historic religious importance of these towns. So this is a big deal. And if the Americans can put forward a plan where the Palestinians are surrounded by Israel and Israel has full security responsibility, and this is okay, and they don't claim that we have to give citizenship to the Palestinians, so it's okay. It means that this is viable. Now, I can tell you that people, when they say two-state solution, today, for some reason, when people say two-state solution, they mean full withdrawal from the Jordan Valley and all of Judea and Samaria to the Green Line. But I can give you 5 different two-state solutions that are not like that. For example, the Jordanian solution, a Palestinian state anchored in Jordan. The new state solution, a Palestinian state anchored in Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula. The Emirate solution, which claims to, instead of building a Palestinian state, building small emirates based on the major cities. It's very similar to the United Emirates. Now all Israelis know what is an emirate. Everybody knows that the United Emirates are the most successful, is the most successful state in the Middle East. So, okay, if it's so successful, why not create the Emirate of Hebron and the Emirate of Ramallah and the Emirate of Jenin and all the other areas will apply our sovereignty? Why this is an issue? Because if there is one thing I think most Israelis agree, we don't want to give 2 million Palestinians Israeli citizenship. It's not our interest. And we need to find a solution that is abiding with the international law to make sure that they have their own government, but we have most of the area and full security of all of Judea and Samaria. This is the basic idea. So today we educate and talk about the fact that there are many solutions for the issue of dealing with the Palestinians, and you just need to find the right solution. I'm reminding, I talked now about 4 solutions. Trump in some scenario, Emirates, Jordan, Gaza. And none of them talk about us having to give up anything that is already ours. And this is something that unfortunately is not understood enough, and we have to educate a lot about that. But it all starts with the understanding that there is no Israel. We will not exist if we don't control fully Judean and Samaria, and if we don't have the Jordan Valley as our eastern border. Israel cannot thrive. Now, people ask me, but listen, today you have new technologies and so on. I'm saying it's the kind of war we have today, no technology can solve the issues that we have to deal with. I mean, I'll give an example. I mean, when you look at Tel Aviv from a place like Eli, you see all of Tel Aviv with one anti-missile with a big range. You can shoot any house or any street in all the coastal area. Today, for example, in Gaza, there is one place where you see a few hundreds of meters of the train that goes from Beersheba to Ashkelon. Because there is one place where you see a few hundred meters, each time in Gaza there are problems, the train stops. Here, anywhere you stand, you don't see 100 meters. You see everything. From Hedera all the way to Rishon LeZion and to Ashdod. Everything. This means that one small cell of terrorism can completely stop all of Israel. And this is not something we can live with. I mean, today, for example, if we want to apprehend a terrorist in Gaza, to apprehend a terrorist in Gaza means war. War, full-scale war with the Palestinians. We cannot apprehend even one person. They can build endlessly their capabilities without shooting at us, just build more and more rockets and so on. And once they decide to go to war, they will be in full capacity. And we cannot do anything. But in Judean and Samaria, if somebody just dreams about maybe doing something, the same night, there will be 2 or 3 military cars going into his town and arresting him. This is not something we are able to do in Gaza. And we cannot have Judea and Samaria becoming another Gaza. Because this is what will happen. Because the Palestinians, at the end of the day, have several problems. First of all, their basic ideology is to annihilate us. They don't really want peace. And this is not talking politics. This is talking reality. This is what they want. There is not a single map anywhere in the Palestinian, in the Gaza or Judea and Samaria that we exist. We don't exist. So the other thing is that they don't really have sovereignty over their own people. I mean, Gaza is altogether a different state today. And in Judea and Samaria, once their prime minister is gone, Abbas, most likely there will be anarchy. We don't know what will happen there. We cannot sign anything with them because there's nobody really to sign with. So this is a problem, and this is why we need to take care of our own security. Now, you know, when there was a suggestion of applying sovereignty now, Bitconistim were very supportive. And some people said, even people who want sovereignty said, but listen, you know, if we do this now, maybe they'll shoot at us, maybe there'll be a small intifada, who knows what will happen. The way we look at it, we say, listen, we are looking at national security hundreds of years from now and thousands of years from now. If a moment is presented where we can do this, even if it will have a minimal price. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But we have to do it for the next generations. We have to do the right thing, as Zionism always did. Do the right thing, deal with the consequences for the next generations. And this is why we are so supportive of applying sovereignty. I would be happy at this stage to give you the chance to ask questions, so please. Don't be shy.
אני פתחתי מיקרופונים.
Can
you hear me? Kenneth
Okay,
Brown?
hold on. I will. First of all, I want to say thank you to Amir, because I want to just read to you a few things that people wrote. Amir, can you hear me? One
Sure.
second on my. Let me see where you are. Oh, here you are. Somebody wrote, Carol, he's fantastic. He explains everything so well. We must send this to many people, so don't worry. You all will get the link to this, to the recording of this lecture, and you will be able to forward it to whoever you want to forward. Somebody asked at the beginning of your lecture, when you spoke about the youth, Zamira, what is taught in the schools in Israel about our right to this land?
So maybe I'll answer that for a moment.
Yeah.
When I ask, today we really concentrate on trying to educate all the pre-army programs, the children that are 18, 19, and so on, before they go to the army, the mechinot, sometimes also the high schools. When asking even the most basic questions, like, okay, guys, you're talking about Palestinians, Palestine. Where did the name Palestine come from? This probably should be the most basic thing that youngsters in Israel should be taught. Talking about the Zionistic narrative, the Jewish narrative. Maybe 1% know the answer, maybe. Maybe 1% know that the name Palestine has nothing to do with Muslims, nothing to do with Arabs, and everything to do with the Jewish people. That it's a name that was given by the Romans after they threw us out of our country. They wanted to erase the name of Israel and Judea from history, and they changed the name from Judea to Palestina, a name, by the way, that Arabs can't even pronounce. The children don't know that, at least not in the secular schools. And if you don't understand that, how can you understand the Jewish narrative? Because they really think that actually we came to a place where there was a Palestinian state here before.
Amir, I must say one sentence about this. Judith Katzover and myself, we meet groups all the time also in Oz וגאו, as part of something called Shavua Yosh, the week of Judea and Samaria, where the pre-military youth are meeting the different narratives. They are obligated to meet the different stories about Judea and Samaria. They meet Ahmed from Ramallah, who claims we stole this land. They meet Yossi from Peace Now, claiming that we need to give up this land. And then they meet Judith and Nadia, who say that this land belongs to us. And they're 18-year-olds. And very often they come at the end of the lectures and say to us, we heard Ahmed, we heard Yossi, now we heard Judith and Nadia. Who is right? Who is correct? And it's terrible.
Yeah, I know. And I think that the big news about the Bitchonistim, because we are officers, because many of us are not necessarily look religious or something. I say look because each one in his own art, but we are able to really affect the way they think, because they look up to high-ranking officers and to commanders and so on, and they trust. It's easier for them to trust what we say than hearing this from whether it's religious or settlers or so on, because we are perceived as, I mean, when I live in Caesarea and I talk about that, it's easy for them to understand. We also speak their own language. They can relate to it easier.
A question.
Yes.
Political Zionism is extremely important, I understand, in Israel, but I'm concerned, living here in the United States, about what I can do. And of course, I try to do everything I can through educating people through the podcast. But what is going on here in places like California, where I live, and other places here in the United States, to educate young people what's being done on the university campuses? Are you just working through organizations like Hillel? I mean, what's going on to educate people here so they can?
This is a very important question.
I
First
just
of
want
all,
to say,
we're reaching out.
Amir, Denise, Gary Pendel, it's an honor to have you on with us. She's a broadcaster and she has a very, very famous podcast. So welcome tonight with us, Denise.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are reaching to as many organizations as we can and say to them, listen, we are available. We have a lot of good English-speaking officers who can explain these issues in a very clear way and help educate the Jewish people in the United States and in other places. We're also going...
It's about Jewish people.
Yeah, I know. It's overall.
Need to know.
Overall, but I think we have to start with the Jewish people, because if the Jewish people don't understand the issues, we can hardly ask anybody else to really understand this. So we are talking with policymakers. We are reaching to communities. We would be happy to also work with Hillel on the campuses and talk about that. I've lectured a lot in campuses on behalf of, for example, of Our Soldiers Speak for a few years. And yes, it's very important.
Your organization to try to, maybe set something up, or what can I do personally?
Well, first of all, I'm sending my mail, so everybody can be in touch. If you are willing to arrange, whether it's podcasts or lectures, webinars, whatever, we'll be more than happy. I really hope that maybe in May, June, we'll be able to fly to the States and give lectures also in person. We really have outstanding speakers and very proud Jewish Zionistic guys, and very professional. And if you look also in our website, we talk about national security, not only about the state of Israel, but the Jewish people overall, because I think we are living in an era where living in Israel for a Jew is becoming more and more safe, and living as a Jew outside of Israel, it's becoming more and more dangerous. And this is very different from what was in the last few decades. We see it in Europe. We see the rise of anti-Semitism, which is unbelievable, really. And we have to seriously think how we defend the Jewish people, not only the state of Israel.
It's a good question. What about the Kurds? I noticed, I look at their websites, KurdNet and Rudal. It seems that there are a lot of people very pro-Israel there, and also Kurds also in the United States and in Europe. If they can be sort of contacts with them, maybe also for them to be on our side, both in the Middle East and also Kurds who are abroad, because I think there is a sort of genuine want for them to be with us in a certain way.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Amir, somebody else asked, what can we regular people do? What do you suggest we do?
Well, I think, different things. One is, of course, being active on social media, because everybody today is in social media and sharing information and so on. We as an organization, we're very active in social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. And mainly trying to reach to people to organize presentations. of course, we as an organization are also, like any non-profit organization, we are reaching also to donors to enable us to bring our voice everywhere, in the media, in social media. And now we are writing a paper that will be published probably next week to the Biden administration, saying what we think should be the right policy in the Middle East. And I can promise you that what we are saying, nobody else is saying, not the way we say it anyway. I've seen some of the position papers that were given to this administration that are catastrophic, talking about Israel. And they need to understand that we are a growing force and we are going to stand and defend the state of Israel.
There's a question here from Batya. What can be done about the officers and IDF generals who are saying that the two-state solution is good? I think that you're talking about the group that is called, I forgot their name. And the second, and Rina, also, I agree with what you wrote, that also in the religious high schools, they should learn more about and the yeshivot, they should know more about Jewish history and I agree with, there's a lot of work on education, but what about this other organization of left-wing officers? I forgot their name.
So, yes, Commanders for Israel Security, and what we do on a daily basis, even today morning, is countering them all the time. I always laugh that as a commander in the combat engineers, each time we have a problem in the field, we use the 5-kilo hammer. So this is what we are applying on them every day. Each time they talk about separation, each time they talk about, not about sovereignty, but about annexation. Each time they try to push forward their ideas, we counter that, we explain what they mean, and I end by giving a small example. When I was interviewed in the radio together with one of the generals on their side, and I said we should apply sovereignty in the Jordan Valley, and he opposed that. So he was asked, listen, Matan, don't you think that the Jordan Valley is very important for Israel's security? He said, of course I do. Of course I do. This is a security border. Now, to somebody who hears such a comment, it sounds like he said, yes, it's a very important issue, and it's a security border. It sounds very serious. But basically he's saying that the Jordan Valley is like South Lebanon. It's a security parameter that is not under Israeli sovereignty, which means that the IDF would stay there for a short period of time, and then it will leave. And then it will defend us. The Palestinians, the Jordanians, the UN, the Marines. And this is, he won't say that. He won't say the truth. He won't say that this is what he means. So they use different ways of expressions. And we take these expressions and we talk to the public and explain what they mean exactly. People, for example, don't open their papers in their own website. They have a very elaborated plan that nobody reads, but we read every word of it, and it's terrible.
Are you going to put a copy of the position paper that you're submitting to Biden on your website? Yes? Okay,
yes,
great.
Yes. First of all, it will be in our website, and also, of course, we'll send it also to Nadia and Judith, and no problem.
Will you email it out, Nadia, also?
Yes, we will. With Amir's permission, we will definitely do so. I think, Amir, there's a lot of people who added comments to the chat. We're not going to be able to answer all your questions. Obviously, it was a fascinating lecture. We want to thank you very, very much. Amir put on the chat his email, so you can look at it. I saw the latest question also. People ask you also who to vote for and who's the next peace partner. We're not going to be able to answer all those questions. I think we'll leave it up.
First of all, we don't support any party or any politician.
Yes,
we support the people of Israel and the land of Israel.
Our next lecture, first of all, so once again, a loud applause for you, Amir. Thank you
Thank you very
again
much.
in the name of Judith Katzover, myself, and we thank Renee Margolis and Shira Schreier and Yigal for organizing all this. Without them, this wouldn't happen. Our next lecture will be in Hebrew by Professor Chaim Gewirtzman on the 17th of January, and the English one we will update you by email and by WhatsApp. Thank you very much, and toda to all of you. Toda Amir Avivi. בהצלחה.
תודה.
Thank you.
Judith, רגע, now I see you. Judith is back. I want to have, רגע, יגאל, אל תדע. Judith, I would like to hear a few words by Judith. You were gone, יצאת לשנייה, we would like to finish with Judith. I'll translate. Judith, תפתחי, רגע, we open your microphone. 1 second, yeah, go for it, yes.
אמיר, ערב טוב, הייתה הרצאה מעניינת מאוד, מאוד בהירה. אני חושבת שאנשים הבינו את הבהירות הזאת, ומאוד התרשמו מזה, ראיתי את ההערות שכתבו.
Judith says, first of all, saying thank you for such a clear and understandable lecture. It was very, very clear.
תודה, אמיר. תודה לכולם, ותמשיכו להיות איתנו.
Continue to be with us, continue to be updated, and there's a lot of work ahead. Kol Tov, Laila Tov.